Welcome to the Women's Agency Podcast, where together we highlight women in business and their impact in the world. This show is brought to you by the Women's Agency, amplifying women's voices. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. This is Arlia, and you're watching or listening to the Women's Agency Podcast, where we tell stories of inspiring women, interview inspiring women who have really accomplished a lot in their life and learned a lot of lessons. Today, I'm joined by Mildred J. Mills, author and coach. Hi, Mildred.
Hello, how are you,
It's
Arlia?
so good to see you. Thank you
good
for
to see
being
you
here.
too.
Tell us who you are and what you do, please.
I am Mildred J. Mills, as you said. I am the author of Daddy's House, a daughter's memoir of setbacks, triumphs, and rising above her roots. In fact, that is a Amazon best-selling memoir.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And it won an award recently, but I am also a podcaster and a coach. I grew up in Alabama, third of 17 children, picking
Wow.
cotton on a 60-acre farm. I left the farm and moved to Columbus, Ohio, way back in the early 70s. But anyway, I learned how to program computer boards at the time, went into data processing, something. Who knew anything about that back then? Not me. I'd never heard of a computer before.
Yeah.
But suddenly there I was programming them. But anyway, so after that, I spent 30 years in the IT industry. And after leaving corporate America, I decided to do something that I wanted to do versus something that I needed to do to raise a family and care for myself.
That's great. I love that story because it's, we could call it the American dream, but it's so much more than that. It is really overcoming whatever obstacles you were born into and creating a really powerful life for yourself by your own hand.
It's interesting that you should say creating a life for myself and getting over things, because my podcast is my Cotton Patch Moment, and its premise is regardless of the circumstances you're born into, you can change them if you're willing to work for it.
Oh, that's so
And,
true.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I tell you, I knew I was never going to pick cotton again. That was something I had to do. It was my father's cotton field, and I was a child at home. And I decided, I don't care what it takes. I'm going to work my backside off. So I've always said, you may be smarter than me, but I guarantee you can't outwork me.
Yeah. That's incredible. So how did you make the choice to leave corporate and strike out and become an author and a coach?
I left corporate. I had quite a run at corporate, 30 years actually, winning all kinds of awards for being this hardworking, amazing employee. And then I hit a snag where things turned sour with corporate. And I won't go into so much of what happened, but I decided to leave corporate. And when I first left, I decided to volunteer at a women's shelter. And at that women's shelter, I heard some horrendous stories of every type of abuse, or there was domestic violence, there was sexual abuse, all these things. And some of these women just felt like they had no way out. And what I did when I went there is I actually encouraged them. I talked to them about me growing up in a home.
Yeah, you're living proof that can offer them some inspiration.
Absolutely. I said I grew up in a house where there was domestic violence, but I also, even though my father was an abuser, he was also a hardworking man who they took a farm and they took a wilderness actually when my mom was pregnant with me and turned it into this working farm where they raised 17 children on that farm. But I just encourage these people to not feel sorry for yourself. You're not a victim. You're never gonna be a victim. You are worthy. You are good. You can do so many things for yourself. And I saw some of those people, and then I started doing mock interviews where they could get back into the workplace. And so my time was valued. These people valued me. And I thought to myself, okay, so I've spent 2 years with these ladies, and I wanted to know more about their story, of course. I had told them a lot about myself, and I said, I'm going to go and interview my mother. I wanna
Oh,
know about her story. I knew her as my mother, but I said so I drove from Houston, Texas to Wetumpka, Alabama, which
mm,
was my home, and they still lived in that home that I was born in.
goodness.
Yeah. And I said, "Mom, I wanna know your story." And I said, "Someday I might write a book, and my story is no story without your story."
Mhm.
So she told me all about her childhood. I asked her every question I had ever wanted
And
to
she
know.
was willing?
At first, I said, "I'd love to know your
'Cause a
story."
lot of older people don't feel comfortable sharing their story.
They really don't, and I was armed for her to say no. But I had my little tape recorder in my
Yeah.
purse, and so when I said, "I just wanna know you, Mom," I said, "I wanna know, first of all, why did you stay in an abusive relationship? What made you do these things?" I just have some questions, woman to woman.
Mhm,
I am your daughter, but I'm also a woman and a mother,
mhm,
and we had this amazing relationship as adults. Now as a child, oh, it was a different kind of relationship,
mhm.
but she said, "I'll tell my story." And she said, "It's time I told somebody."
Wow.
So I asked her all these questions.
It's amazing what happens when you just ask.
Yeah, we have not because we ask not, and
Mhm.
that's
Yes.
scriptural.
Yes.
And so she said, and it was so interesting. She said, "Get me a little glass of wine." And I said, "I didn't know you drank wine, Mom." And she said, "There are a few things you don't know about your mama." And I said, "Okay." So I whipped my little tape recorder out of my tape recorder, out of my purse,
Uh-huh.
and we just started talking. And I just asked her, I said, "Tell me about your childhood. Tell me what it was like to grow up you." I said, "Were you spoiled?" She said, "Oh, no." My mother was the youngest of 10, and when she was born, I think her brother next to her was like 4 years older. And so her mother was old, quite old when she graduated from high school. When my mother graduated from high school,
Mhm.
my grandmother was in her 60s, nearly
Mm.
70 years old. So she wanted my mom out of the house and so forth and so on. And she forced her to marry my father. And it was just an interesting life she shared with me. She had wanted to become a teacher or a hairdresser, she said. And she said, "But I had no finances for that. So I had to marry your dad. I found a way
Mhm.
to make a way." And so she never wanted to be a farmer's wife. She never wanted to work on a farm or whatever. And she just told me so many wonderful stories.
Mhm.
And I have her voice on tape
Mm.
today, although she's been gone for 18, she's been gone since '08.
I wanna pause right there. If your mom is still living, get their voice on recording, on tape, on your phone, on something. Because I did that, and my daughter did that. I think my nephew did that, and I have recordings of my mother who's been gone 5 years,
Oh, that is
and
wonderful.
it's so precious.
Isn't it soothing to go every now and then? And I don't do it very
Yeah,
often, but every now
yeah.
and then I said, "What are you up to today, Mom?" Why not just go and listen to some part of that recording? And it is a treasured thing.
So tell us more about the book. So you recorded your mom's story.
I did record my mom's story. And then, so a few years went by, and I never thought there was anything interesting enough about my life to talk about.
Mm,
But then I thought back over my life, and there have been some things. Some of those things were not so beautiful. They were painful things. I've had some amazing things that happened to me in my life. Like at age 19, I won a beauty pageant
mm,
and I won Miss Talent for singing in a national contest. And then I got to thinking about I actually started out writing a different book.
mhm,
I was having a difficult time with my daughter, and I started writing about a tumultuous mother-daughter relationship. And then I decided to go and get a master's in creative writing
mhm,
so that I thought, "Oh, I wanna write a great book. I don't wanna just write a book."
mhm.
And in doing so, I was introduced to a mentor who was got and this program only consisted myself and that mentor. And so she said, "You've gotta start over. You've written too much." And I thought, I joined this program so that I could finish the book I'm writing.
Yeah.
But anyway, I remember having taken a couple writing classes before, and this lady said, "Well, you're telling us all this stuff about yourself as an adult, but we don't know you as a child. Who are you to tell this story?" And so I decided when this mentor said, "You've got to start over," I said, maybe. I also remembered a prompt from that English class that says, "Start at this one very pivotal point in your life and see where it takes you." And I started on the day that I left home.
Mm.
My father drove me to Ohio to start school. And so in writing that book, I worked with this mentor, and it was so interesting to me, so many things that I had forgotten and it took a while to come to a title. I always wanted Daddy's House because I just thought about how, wow, living in that house taught me so much. It taught me how to be strong.
Mhm.
My father, without ever saying the words, taught me to be independent. He taught me that I could do anything I wanted to do in life. He taught me that by there was violence in my home.
Mhm.
His justification for that was I remember him telling my brothers, "I'm beating you past the prison doors."
Mm.
And he raised all of us. And there have been three of my siblings have been in prisons, but my sister was a warden
Mhm.
and my brothers were over the maintenance. They were in management. They were
Mm.
running the prison. They weren't incarcerated.
Mhm.
So even though some may say that corporal punishment is not, I have mixed emotions about it because I remember
Mhm.
how you get hit about something and you think twice about doing it
Yeah.
again.
It is motivating.
Oh, it is. Oh, it's motivating. And it may be everybody has his or her method of raising children.
Mhm.
And one of the things I said to my kids about discipline is when you have your children, I hope you're the perfect mother that I'm not, or the perfect father that I'm not. But anyway, so the book came about because I had a story to tell
Mhm.
and I needed some healing
Mhm.
because of some things that occurred in my life. And I also had some joy
Mhm.
in my life that I thought, if you can tell this story with not just, I've never been a victim, never gonna be a victim, not just those harsh things that happened to you, but the way you got through those things. Not only did they happen, you didn't just sit there and
Mhm.
feel sorry for yourself.
Or crumple. You didn't
Absolutely
yeah.
not. I thought I used that strong backbone that my father gave me to move myself along
Mhm.
and make sure that I kept moving. And one of the things that I also told my children is it isn't the bump in the road that you hit, it's how you keep moving through that bump. Do you see cars sitting in the middle of the road the next day? No, you have to figure out how to either spin your way out or dig your way out.
Mhm.
But you keep moving and don't be fearful. Fear is such a debilitating thing.
It is.
And so I talk about fear in my talks, and I said, it is one of those things that can cripple you, or it makes you bitter, or makes you better. You
Mhm.
just can't be sitting around afraid. You can, but it takes you nowhere.
Yeah. Oh, that's so inspiring. I was thinking a couple of things as you were talking. First, that our parents are rarely one-dimensional.
Oh, they
They are
are.
multi-dimensional people, so I've experienced something similar with a very flawed father,
Mm-hmm.
but a lot of those really nuggets of gold of lessons
Yes,
from that experience, and then also that carries into your book. It's not a one-sided story of it is a story of triumph,
it is.
but it's not just victim to victor. It is the despair and the joy through every moment, which I think is
It
beautiful.
is. And one of the things I did a motivational speech at my church for Father's Day. And one of the things, and I talked about those harsh moments,
Mhm.
but I talked about those sweet moments, the joy of riding in my father's car for 500 miles to Ohio
Mm.
after having picked cotton for all those years and after having been, I'll say, beaten as a child. But my father took like $500 paid for my tuition in full and drove me
Wow.
to a better place. And he stood there and we weren't huggy, kissy kind of families. He shook my hand and he said, "Babe," which was his name for me, "I'm leaving you to do the right thing."
Mm,
And he had given me everything he could.
mhm,
And I was so I didn't realize at the time the gift that my father had given me. And one of the things that I said in that Father's Day speech is, my father wasn't perfect, but he was perfect for me.
mm. So beautiful. Thank you. We're
Yeah.
gonna take a break, and when we come back, we're gonna talk about your coaching work and your podcast and all the things you're into. We'll be right
Okay.
back. Gather the team at Serendipity Labs Atlanta Cumberland for a collaborative work experience. Whether you're hosting a training workshop, board meeting, or a lunch and learn, they have the private room that suits all your needs. Discover why they have over 100 five-star reviews and see how Cumberland is the best fit for your business. Call 770-765-0590 today to start planning your next teamwork day. And we're back with Mildred Mills, sharing her incredible story of her upbringing and the book that you wrote. Tell us what else is in the book and how you use it now in your work.
I use it in my work because I have had the opportunity to speak to women
Mhm.
that are in or have been in abusive
Mm,
situations, either sexual violence or domestic violence. And I actually read my first chapter.
mm,
And that first chapter is about my upbringing. And it takes us all the way through and up to the moment where I left the house. And one of the last lines in that chapter is, I looked through the mirror and it was the middle of the night, and I said, the house faded to black. But as I looked at that house, I remember what I was leaving behind. I'd taken my last, you know what kind of beating from my daddy.
mhm,
And so, but I just talk about having grown up picking cotton and how horrendous a life that was. But pricks your fingers. And I had to cook as a little girl, something I really enjoy doing today. And so I don't just talk about the pain of growing up like that. I talk about some of those joys. Like
mhm,
it's something that I started cooking when I was 5, 6 years old.
mm,
My mother was having all these babies, and when after each baby, I thought she was sick. And it was not until I was an adult that she told me, "No, I wasn't sick." Because I said, "Remember, Mom, when you were sick and you were teaching me to cook?" He'd say, "Go get me a boiler, not a pot." That's what they called them. "Get me a boiler." And she would tell me the ingredients to bring and put in that pot. And then when I was done, this little girl goes up and stands on a stool and puts it on the stove. And I'm cooking dinner for the family. And
mhm.
she said, "No, I wasn't sick." I said, "Why were you in bed?" She said, "Because took to the bed 2 weeks after each child was born." And people ask me, "What do you mean 17 children? Same mother?" I said, "Same mother and same father." So yes, there was a
Mhm.
nuclear family there. And so, but
That's the way it used to happen.
it
It
is
just
the
was
way it used to happen,
yeah.
and those people from that era stayed in their marriages. I don't care what was going on,
Mhm,
and they made it work. And I tell you, in my parents' latter years, I was very glad they were together. There were times I wish they had just moved along.
yeah.
What works for me doesn't necessarily work for you, and who am I to
Mhm,
judge and say, "Why are you staying there with that person?" Somebody might say to me, "Why are you staying with that person?"
mhm.
So
That thought occurred to me just the other day. It's with all the conversation around the Super Bowl halftime show, I was like, "Okay, I guess there are gonna be people who judge, but you can't judge someone else's experience."
absolutely, you can't.
There are whole groups of people who have a
Right.
similar experience, but
Mhm.
there's no way that any of us can say, "Oh, I know exactly what you're going through.
No.
I know that's just not even real."
Yeah,
We try to make it real,
and
but it's not.
speaking of this
We don't have the context for someone else's experience.
no, we don't, and even but before you go, speaking of the Super Bowl, my husband is born and raised in Philadelphia, and we are
Oh,
Eagles fans, I'm just
um,
saying.
then congratulations.
Yeah, but even if you grew up in the same house,
Mhm.
you don't have the same experiences, or you don't might not feel the same way about what occurred in that house.
'Cause you're an individual.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we're sitting there in the same place, and you can walk away with an absolutely different experience, and you can say, "This happened to me," and you say, "No, it didn't. This happened. This is the way I felt," or whatever. So you're absolutely right. None of us can walk until you walk in those shoes. My shoes don't fit your feet.
That's right.
I doubt that my shoes fit your feet, and the way they feel to my feet probably isn't the way they feel to your feet.
But
So
regardless, you do have a story that can really help and motivate and inspire women who have been in domestic violence situations
and
or
even in sexual violence,
yeah,
I
yeah.
was at the age of I experienced a horrendous sexual
Mm,
situation, but I lived to talk about it. And sometimes when we're in these places, we're enlightened about many things. And I won't tell my story sitting here talking to you. It's in the book how I
mhm,
took my power back
mm,
right there in that room. And when bad things are happening to you, you can sit there and be a victim, or you can figure out, okay, so you figure out, okay, they're not going to kill me. So I am going to live, and then I'm going to take my power back.
yeah.
And so
Otherwise, you're yeah, you're
you become a victim, and you
mhm,
become bitter, and
mm,
I tell you that bitterness shows on your face, but joy also shows on your face, and
mhm.
it's so interesting to me. Sometimes I can be walking down the street and people look at me and smile, and I thought, "Oh, I wonder why they smiled at me." My husband said, "You're looking them right in the eye." I said, "Of course I am. I enjoy,
Yeah,
meeting people and looking them in the eye."
that's really not all that common, is it? I
It
mean, we're
really isn't,
yeah,
because some of us, we avert our eyes because we don't wanna be seen, or we think that somebody wants to harm us, and I'm
mhm.
thinking,
I'm a massive introvert, but I love making eye contact because when I feel comfortable with someone because I know it makes them feel seen and presenced and
absolutely.
heard.
Yes, it does, because you don't know, like, sometimes you're driving along and there's this person on the corner with a sign of some sort, and occasionally I do a teeny tiny little crack in the window and I push money out that
Mhm,
window, and my husband doesn't like that. He said, "You don't know, those people may harm you." I said, "If they can harm me through that little crack, then so be it,
mm,
but it's in my heart to do something," and I look those people in the eye as well,
yes,
because who has looked at them,
right,
or who has seen them? And I don't know what's in their heart. They may be up to good or no good on that corner. I have no idea. But if it's in my heart to share, I'm going to
exactly,
share.
exactly.
And
It's how you're being led because we can't control how other people respond or don't respond or use our gifts in whatever way we approve of. It's do you feel led to give? And if so, give.
absolutely. And you ask how I use my book as a tool. I use that book. Like I said, I was blessed to be in front of a group of women. And if you've ever, back in the day, I guess they had this welfare to work kind of program.
Mhm,
And these were people from that kind of a community. And after my talk, I talked about having had my daughter when I was 20 years old, and I was in college, and I had no intent. I didn't want to be pregnant or have a husband at that
mhm,
age, because I had just left a home with all those kind of
yeah,
situations. And I talked about how, gee whiz, I was in college, so how was I going to care for myself? And back in the 70s, I had a college a work study position, and when that guy found I was pregnant, he fired me. And but so situations change and you do what you have to do. And I talked about how I ended up in a situation that I didn't plan to be in, but I had skills.
mhm,
And when my daughter was born, I went, I said, I was embarrassed to be on welfare
mm,
for 6 months in my life. But I tell you what, I said, I don't demean anybody else for being there. You do what you have to do. But my
mhm,
father had taught me year after year. One of the things he always said is, we don't accept charity. And I thought, I never told my parents about that
mm,
period. They didn't ask, how are you making it? Every now and then they'd send me something. I didn't ask because I left 13 young children at
mhm,
home when I left home.
mhm,
So my parents had given me everything that they could, and it was more than enough. So I used that book to tell those stories. And one of the most wonderful compliments I received after that particular speech was, "He's the first person that has ever spoken to us and could talk to us on our level."
Mm.
And there were a couple of those people that said, they bring us to these talks and we're talked down to.
Mhm.
And I almost didn't show up for this one because I just don't have the energy to be talked down to.
Yeah, I
I'm
totally
doing my
understand that.
best,
Mhm.
and I don't know when I can get out of this situation. And I said, keep trying. Don't give up. There is something out there for you. I don't know what your path is going to be to get there,
Mhm.
but don't give up.
Sounds like it's pretty rewarding. I would think it'd be rewarding for me to be able to offer those people some hope, some encouragement, some examples from your life.
Absolutely.
So tell us about your work now.
My work now, I have a podcast,
Mhm.
My Cotton Patch Moment, it's
Mhm.
entitled. And a cotton patch moment is you're you're in a bad marriage. You're in whatever that situation is where you know that you should make a change.
Mhm.
Do you change or do you continue down that dead end road? I choose to change. And I'm not one of those people who is in a situation and you just keep on making bad mistakes. I'm in my second marriage.
Mhm.
I married my college boyfriend, and because we had a child together,
Mhm.
I liked him a lot, but I didn't want a husband, or
Mhm.
circumstances moved me in a different direction. And after a couple years, I thought, this isn't working. We are incompatible. And so I said, hey, and he said, I'm not going anyplace. So I thought, oh, yes, you are. But anyway, so you make choices and I didn't make that choice lightly.
Mhm.
I knew that I'm 23 years old and I feel like I'm 100
Mm.
and I don't want to feel like I'm 100 and I know I can work and I have a skill. So I went and decided to go and take care of myself alone. But my work is so I do these motivational talks. And I also, like I said, have the podcast. And my podcast is about making those changes.
Mm.
And it's always a motivational talk. And this is going to the end of my third season. And this season was the first time I had guests.
Mm.
And it was so wonderful. And the talks were about resilience
Mhm.
and about becoming vulnerable. And I asked each guest had to have read my book, first of all. And we didn't just sit there talking about my book, we talked about their life.
Mhm.
And then I did ask, okay, so I know that you were an early reader of my book, Daddy's House. And there were a lot of vulnerable moments in that book. So was there one that you could relate to? And if so, how did it impact you? And ask them to share a vulnerability
Mhm.
and how they changed, or did they confront the vulnerability?
Mhm.
And if so, how did you feel after you did so? And so, if you want to ask me, which you look like you do, tell me about a vulnerability. Being vulnerable was writing that book,
Mhm.
sitting there,
Sure.
opening your life up to people that don't know you, even people who thought they knew you. Like my husband had asked a couple questions. I said, nobody knows anybody inside out except that
Mhm.
person, him or herself. And so, being vulnerable is sitting there writing that book and then just feeling like after you've written it, you've lost 50 pounds.
Mm. Yeah,
It is such a weight off of your shoulders because we carry a lot. We really
we do.
do. Most of us carry a lot of stuff
Mhm.
that burdens us down a little bit.
Mhm. Absolutely.
So to be able to tell that story and have others say, you have given me the courage to tell my story. Would you understand how that makes me feel?
Yeah, that's beautiful. I
Oh my
understand.
God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're getting near the end. Tell us if you work with clients, what you do with them and how people can reach out and get your book and listen to your podcast and work with you.
I actually have a website. It is mildredjmills.com.
Mhm.
And I am on social media. And I am Mildred J. Mills everywhere, I believe. And the book is actually on Amazon and it's Barnes and Noble. In fact, if you just Google the book's name or my name, Mildred J. Mills and Daddy's House, it pops up in all kinds of places. In fact, some folks have told me that it is actually on shelves in Walmart
Mm.
and some other places, and I didn't know that. I knew that it was
Doesn't that feel good?
yeah,
Yeah,
that
that's
does feel
awesome.
good. And so, but one thing that I'd love to share is if your book club reads my book, I would be happy to make an appearance.
Ooh.
And even if it's in Atlanta or
Are you
anywhere.
listening, Oprah?
Yeah. Are you listening, Oprah? I would love for you to read my book. I know that you can relate to many parts of my story. But I will definitely appear at book clubs, and I have. And those are some of the most amazing conversations that
Oh,
I can
yeah.
possibly have because I'll read a little bit of the story, and many people in the audience will have already read the book,
Mhm.
and we have a discussion. I don't do they say, "You wanna do a Q&A?" I said, "I wanna have a discussion." And it can start with questions and answers.
Mhm.
But yes, and my podcast is on all major platforms.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
Great.
Spotify, Apple, Google, those places.
I can't wait to see what else blossoms in your life with the way you use the book and the people you work with and the podcast. If anybody wants to reach out to you, they use your social media,
Yes,
your
the
website, Mildred J.
website.
Mills. So
Mhm.
we will have all those links in the show notes. Mildred, thank you so much for being here. It's a pleasure to know you, and you're so inspiring to all of us to just be, fearless and brave and not let any victim mentality keep us from what we want to be doing.
Absolutely. My motto, real quick, is
Mhm.
never underestimate the power of rejection.
Ooh,
So fear not. So you're rejected. Get up and keep it moving.
thank you. Thank you
You're
so
welcome.
much. Thank you so much for joining Mildred and I today. This is Arlia Hoffman, and this is the Women's Agency Podcast. Do check us out on YouTube and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Do check out Mildred's podcast, like and share them with people you know that you think might be inspired of them because it helps me, it helps Mildred, it helps anybody who needs that kind of encouragement and support. And if you have any show ideas or you want to reach out, you can reach me at arlia@thewomensagency.com. Thanks for watching. We'll see you here again next time on The Women's Agency. Thanks for joining us. This program is brought to you by The Women's Agency, a full-service podcast production and coaching firm in Atlanta, Georgia. Visit thewomensagency.com for more.